Your story matters, don't let it fade. When everything changed, you were made.
Hey, this is Wendy Babcock with When Stories, the podcast. Today I'm joined with Erika Sweeney. Welcome, Erika.
Hi, Wendy. Thanks for having me.
Sure, of course. So I'm excited for everyone to learn more about who you are. And then after this interview, we'll play your one story, the audio, so they can listen to it. So that said, I'll have you just introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about what you do.
Okay, I am Erika Sweeney. I am the host of the My Fit Tribe podcast. It's a podcast I started just about a year ago with the hopes of giving people information on things that will improve their wellness in body, mind, and spirit, along with stories of personal and spiritual growth. So that's my main focus as far as impact goes. My day job is a real estate investor and operator, so that's my not so fun day job.
It's interesting because those things kind of balance each other out. You know, you've got the health and wellness, but then you've got more the business side of things like, so do you get to feel like you get to be more creative in one aspect, but then like more down to earth business? Is that
Yeah, I think the big thing is that I've been doing the real estate for over 20 years. So that's just kind of what I do without thinking, kind of my autopilot. The podcast and the Fit Tribe is all much more true to who I am. And really, again, making that impact, kind of my second mountain, as they say in life, trying to do something that really feels genuine to me. So that's where I stay awake in the middle of the night with exciting ideas, where the real estate keeps me awake in the middle of the night with the stress.
stress and ideas all keeping you awake?
Yes, exactly.
Nice. So how do you balance all of that? Because there's a lot involved in both of those things. So how are you able to balance those things?
Some days are better than others. As I mentioned in my Wen story, we did downsize. We used to have almost 800 units and a full team. And then in 2022, we downsized. So now we have about 50-ish rental units, but we don't have the staff now to help. So it's just me doing it. As far as the operation side, and then my husband does, the maintenance side with our crew that we have with him. So it's nice that it's smaller, but then it's also hard because you don't have as many people to rely on to help you out. So then that's my priority number one. So it's really the podcast is something that I try to weave in my spare time around that, but really trying to make it a priority because it really fuels my soul, really makes me happy. So I've learned to trust that inner voice.
Nice. So and I know you talked about a little bit in your one story, which they're going to hear next, but give a little bit of insight of like, where did the podcast come from, right? Because it is a
Mhm.
little, or it's a lot different from what your day job is, right? That this is your heart, your soul,
Yeah.
your passion. And so how did this come about?
Yeah, as you hear in my story is I took a journey into bodybuilding in 2019. And through that, I met some amazing people, and one of whom is one of my best friends. And when I was going to get on stage for my very first show, I was so terrified. And she's like, well, don't you ever listen to a podcast? You can listen to, Ed Milet or whatever she referenced me to. And I was like, I don't listen to podcasts. I don't even know how to do that. And so I started listening to that just to kind of change my mindset on approaching things with a different attitude, different perspective to give me courage in times when I did the most. So that was my first exposure to podcasts. And then funny story, as my journey continued, when we downsized, we bought the building that our office currently is in. And I have my now producer has a studio here in our building. So when I first saw that he was in there, I was like, oh, because I thought about it, people doing it. I was like, oh, maybe that's my sign from universe that I have to do the podcast. So I kind of put it off because there's never a perfect time to start. And there's that little voice of doubt in your head that always makes you go, you can't really do that. So I kind of paused and put it in the back burner. And then I decided just to go for it. Again, one of those things like, if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. And my first recording was with that same best friend who had talked about losing her son. And when we were walking back to the recording room, my producer has a whole wall of CDs that he's produced. And I looked down, and I had been walking past this hallway for 2 years in this building. And I looked down, and there is the Mystic Chaplain audio CD. So Kathy had actually done the recording with Jake in here and had produced it, and it was on the wall, and I had never seen it. And I saw it at that moment with the very first episode. So it was another one of those like, okay, let's just move. Let's acknowledge that this is one of those things that's meant to be. So it's been a lot more work than I anticipated, but it's also been just so amazing to talk to so many people who provide so much knowledge and ideas. I have learned something from every single episode. It's been really, really cool.
So off the top of your head, how many episodes do you have? Do you know?
With season one, I wrapped up. That was 34 episodes, and we have almost
Wow.
4,500 downloads from those 34 episodes. And then we're going to start season two in September. I had to take a little break just to kind of ground myself before I kind of tackle that next season that's upcoming.
That's incredible. I mean, to make waves because
Yeah,
the podcast arena, right? There's a lot of podcasts out there, and you get 4,500 downloads in
yeah,
your
and like
season one. That's
yeah,
amazing.
and all around the world, if it's like the number of the cities, it's been heard in like over 30 cities. And I'm gonna have to look at it because when we were doing my When story, that's one of the pieces of information I was gonna include that I didn't. So this is my opportunity. It has been heard, downloaded, I should say, because that's a difference, right?
Yep.
Downloaded it is in over 548 cities and 32 countries around the world in one season. So yeah, it's been really, really cool.
I hope people who are listening right now, their jaws are just dropped because that's just like, if you could see me, my jaw was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And especially because there was some fear around, right, starting it. It's
Oh,
a lot
always.
of work. It's continuous work, but it's something obviously the world needed. Do you think back on like,
Yeah. And I think, what was something that you touched base with me a bit while we went on our When stories journey is, you tend to be afraid to do it because you're afraid of either people thinking a certain way about you or not thinking anything of you at all, which can be
yeah,
almost even worse, right? And, there's so much competition out there. You don't know how to get heard. And I just realized that it was a great opportunity for me to share everybody else's stories because I know that's what impacts me. When I hear what other people have gone through or their information that's not standard that I'm hearing that might help somebody, it just really gives me goosebumps to know that someone could listen to the podcast and hear something that will forever change their life because I've had those when moments, as you know,
mhm.
that have changed mine for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And I love that you shared your one story. So let's talk a little bit about that. What was that process like for you? Because I mean, it was pretty synchronous that you ended up saying yes to the one stories, because there's so many stories that are intertwined here. It's pretty wild to think about, but what was it like for you?
It was really cool. So I had first heard about the When stories. I think it was when you first changed it to When stories. So that would have been, I contacted you, I think November or December of last year. And I thought it was interesting. And we were going to meet and something happened where you had to reschedule. And I was scared to death anyways. I was like, you know what? Let's just have you on my podcast. Can you come on my podcast? So then came on my guest, which I totally appreciated. We had that great conversation. And then Kathy, the chaplain, which you'll hear about in my story, I wanted her, of course, to be on my podcast to tell not only her story, but our story together. And sent her the link to my podcast, and she, of course, saw that your podcast and came on. So when finally I'm like, that little voice saying, do it, do it, do it, do it. And then when I decided to do it, and the timeline worked where Kathy and I were able to go on this journey together, which made it extra emotional for me for sure.
Yeah. And I feel like I had like that kind of what's the word for it? Like kind of a sidebar emotion for both of you because every time you both even in rehearsal or practice doing your talks, I'm like over here like cheering up and stuff because I know of the connection. So I'd be watching you or watching Kathy. I'm just like, this is really amazing to see both of you
Yeah.
go through the process together. So for you sharing your story, right? Because there's different aspects of your story around the bodybuilding, of course, the podcast and other things. What was it like? Was it difficult for you to share, like you, because you're used to helping everybody, but what was it like for you putting your stuff out to the world?
Well, you know the answer to this question because
Yeah.
when we first met, I pretty much at the end of our group meeting, I was like, I don't think I have a story. I don't have nothing to say. I was so scared of sharing it again. Not that I wanted to be worried about what people think, but everybody's worried about, most people are worried about what people think. And I just had this fear of people not caring. Because your point when you first start off, when you're identifying what that when moment is, you ask, well, who cares? Or why should somebody care? And that hit deep somewhere in my soul. I was like, maybe nobody really does. And I really had, then when I had to sit down and put it into words, I mean, that was the first step of just kind of like identifying what it is of your life you want to talk about, because there's so many seasons of life where you are going through, like, how do you pick that moment? And I really wanted to focus on a moment that changed my life, where I had agency over my decisions and my future, and it resulted in a positive experience. So that was really important for me to do that. So when I got it down in writing the first time I read it, I cried because it's very emotional I mean, the whole story in general, with the experience with my dad, of course, is super emotional, but just to stop and kind of step out of yourself a bit and listen to your own words, talk about what you went through and how it affected you, like deep into your soul. It was really so powerful, I think, for all of us who were in this, for sure.
Yeah. And there's always something about each group, I mean, it was meant to be that you were in this group and not sooner, right? You could have been in one of the
Definitely.
earlier groups because we were going to talk, later last year. And there's something to be said about that because your group specifically is pretty tight-knit now, going through that
Yeah.
process. And even though everyone's stories are very different, there's still kind of an underlying thread that ties everybody together. We found synchronicities and commonalities as everyone was sharing different pieces of their story,
Yeah, it was really
so
cool to see that spiritual thread intertwine all of us in different ways. And and just the support that everyone gives, the night before in the rehearsal, I mean, I choked. I totally went blank, couldn't think of the words, and I was so frustrated with myself. And everybody was like, you know what, you got this, so encouraging. And to know that people are there to support you, um, it was really special for sure.
well, it's funny because I related to you when you had such a tough time for rehearsal because that was my experience. And it's my platform I came up with. I got in the rehearsal stage and I couldn't get the words out. I started crying. I was just like, this is so much harder than I anticipated. So like when that happens to people on the stage, I've been through it, so I know what it feels like. So that's why I'm like, you know what? It's going to come together because then the next day, I had goosebumps. I cried. Your talk was so good. You
Yeah.
delivered it so well.
Thank you so much. It was, I talk a lot about it being at the 2 o'clock in the morning where you wake up, and that's when I did that meditation. Well, my two
Yeah.
o'clock in the morning during the When stories was repeating my speech in my head over and over again. But it's amazing, the parts that I practiced the most diligently were the parts I had a hard time saying, which was funny, just the way my brain works or doesn't work, how you look at it. But it was really a powerful experience, and I want to thank you for being such a supportive coach, and all of my group members who, again, were so supportive. And it really just, like I said, it really kind of makes you look at yourself deeply, which is hard for some of us to do. Again, I love sharing everybody else's story, and I love the spotlight being on other people and helping other people. I do not love it to be on myself. So that was definitely a doing hard thing for me. Yeah.
Well, and I think people who are helpers, service-based coaches, people who like to lift others up, it is sometimes hard to look at our own accomplishments and celebrate it, right? Because I know that was a little bit of a piece for some people was like, okay, but if I talk about the good that came out of this and what I did, is it braggy?
Right.
Or you know what I mean? So that is a struggle. But if we were to say that to somebody else, we wouldn't say, "Oh, well, you sound braggy." You'd be like, "Yeah, you go,
Yeah.
girlfriend. Like you should be celebrating that moment." But to say it for ourselves, that's
Well, and
hard.
that's what you said when during one of the classes, is I was like, I don't want to, if I want to say this. And you were like, did you look to other people when you were on your, say, your bodybuilding journey, and see what they did and get motivated by it? I'm like, well, of course. And you're like, all you're doing is telling your story, hoping to impact others. You're not bragging. And I was like, so I spent a lot of time replaying that, your voice saying that to me, like, it's, you may be doing for other people what those other people did for you. And that's all you're doing. And that's all you need to just
Yeah.
trust in yourself for that, for sure.
Yeah, and that's why there's a difference between giving a talk and telling your story.
Hmm.
There is a difference between, it's hard to describe it, but there's a big difference between doing, say, a TEDx, which I love the platform. It's giving a talk. This is storytelling. This is telling from your unique perspective because that's what is going to motivate and inspire somebody else. Just like your friend shared the podcast thing with you,
Yeah.
right? And so
Just
then you
take
were
the
able to
little
go on,
thing.
yeah, just those little things. Yeah.
Mhm.
So now that you've done the one story, right? The stuff is out there. Your podcast will release probably, I'm thinking like next week. So, your video is out there. The book is coming. What has it been like now that you've gotten off the stage and back to everyday life?
Well, I was so blessed to have a huge heartwarming um reveal at our place that my husband threw together like the morning of, because I didn't want to be in the center of the spotlight, and he made a bunch of phone calls and called people and got a great group of people that came and to show their support for me. So we had it playing live, and I hid for part of it. Like ducked down under a table. But then I got a lot of hugs and I got some messages saying people played it for their kids to let them know that they can chase their dreams. I had people who had gone through a grief situation who found comfort in the story about my dad. Just the messages that I received by sharing my story were just made me cry, because it's just really shows that impact that you're trying to make by being so vulnerable and sharing your story. So that was super powerful for me. And again, being able to promote the podcast is great, because that is super exciting for me to be able to continue to provide people answers for their health when they're feeling out of options. So that's been fun to watch that grow too. So to combine the two together is a dream come true for me for sure.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. So, last question then. Do you feel like you have a little bit different perspective with your podcast when you're having guests come on to tell their stories now that you've shared yours? Has it changed at all?
Oh, totally. I mean, for me, when I did my very first recording as the podcast host, I was nervous because I didn't know what to expect. But after that, I was really like, oh, don't worry about it. We're just having a conversation. Don't be nervous. And then, we've had some very raw conversations on the podcast, some about addiction and cancer diagnosis and the loss of a child, and just some really, really raw conversations that have brought us to tears. And, I don't feel, how do I say this? It's still hard for me to, I don't even know how to put the words in it. It's still hard for me to share my story, because I still feel much more comfortable in being able to share others. But I totally respect people's courage for being able to get out there and share what they've been through.
Wow. Well, I'm pretty sure your story is going to affect so many people. So I'm
Mm.
excited for the next part of the podcast that you're listening to, everyone, to hear Erika Sweeney's one story. So thank you again, Eric. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate you too. Thank you.
Your story matters, don't let it fade. When everything changed, you were made.
When everything changed, I was sitting in a veterinary hospital. Those bright fluorescent lights were shining down on me, kind of blinking, reminding me of a childhood classroom or a really bad horror movie, and neither one was giving me any comfort. See, a few days earlier, I had brought my dog Niska in. She was just 3 years old. She had eaten gum off the counter. And I didn't know that that would be the end of her life, or how much this moment was about to impact mine. See, it was that season of life where everything is boiling over. I was a mom of 3, a wife, a business owner, and while seemingly on top of the mountain in many ways, I was also feeling overwhelmed and buried by the bills, the invoices, the responsibilities, the need to grow the business, what we call burned out. So when I sat on that concrete floor next to her that day, I didn't know how I was going to cope with it. So I asked her to send me a sign. I needed a cardinal to know that she was okay. A few days later, I'm in the shower, bawling my eyes out, when I look out the window, and there it is, that beautiful red bird at the perfect place at the perfect time. It was more than just a sign. I also heard a voice in my head that said, life is so short. You are meant for more. And that time, with a new sense of urgency, I started to think, what if I can? See, I was 45 years old. I was active. I went to the gym a few days a week. I even ran a half marathon a few years earlier, and I hate to run. But there I found myself scrolling social media, and it kept popping up, and I kept getting intrigued, and it was bodybuilding. That thing that other people do, especially at my age. But then I heard that voice in my head again, and it said, do something bold. So I made an appointment with a bodybuilding coach. I laugh, thinking about sitting in that parking lot, afraid to even get out of my car. It was probably 5-10 minutes. I didn't know if I was going to make it inside, but I did. I marched in, and I sat at that desk. See, it was June at this time, and we were just 4 months out from what would be my first show. I learned then that a bodybuilding season usually lasts 6 to 9 months, sometimes years. So my coach said, if we're going to do this, we gotta do it now. I knew if I walked out that door to think about it, I probably was not coming back. So I said, what the hell, let's go. Hold on, Erika. Level unlocked. The next few months demanded a kind of discipline that I had never experienced. For me, the workouts were the easy part. I love to lift. But the macros, counting macros, I didn't even know what that meant. The only counting of food I'd ever done was how many handfuls of popcorn I was shoving in my mouth, and let's be honest, I didn't really count. But there I was, working out late at night, doing cardio in the morning, but I didn't know how it was going to turn out. I just made my daily checklist. I did every item on it with everything I had. I just knew I wasn't going to give up. Meanwhile, I could not find that pause here to chase your dreams button for my life. So work was busy, soccer games at night, and my mom was right. Little children, little worries, big children, big worries. But then the day came. It was October 5th, 2019. We walked into the theater, and I remember the stage lights. They were so bright, the kind that make you sweat, and you're not sure if it's from the lights or how nervous you are, or the surreal experience of the spray tan that's meant to highlight the good stuff and hide the not so good stuff. But there I was, standing on stage competing as a figure competitor. I competed in the novice for new athletes. I took a second place. I competed in the masters for 35 and up, another second place. But the one that I remember the most was the open. I was standing alongside 19 other competitors of all ages, most of whom were much younger than I was. We stood on stage and we did our quarter turns to the right for what seemed like forever. When they left the top 10 on the stage, I was still standing. Top 5, still there. Finally, 3rd place, Erika Sweeney. My first show ever. Unbelievable. Level unlocked. You might think that this is just a fitness story. But for me, that day unlocked a focus so sharp that it allowed me to mute and quiet that noise and stress of everyday life. I met incredible women that lifted each other up to be that best version of themselves. And I learned that hard work, often quiet, unseen work, could lead to incredible outcomes. And that's when the idea of my Fit Tribe first came to shape. I thought, why can't we have this for life, just to bring each other up? Meanwhile, I continued that season. In my second show, I got my pro card, and then I had to pivot back to work where I implemented a new operating system. I held out hope for competing again the next season, and then it was March of 2020, and you guessed it, the world shut down, and 2 weeks out from my first show, it was canceled. But I had learned a new focus. So I decided to set my sight on the craziest dream I could think of, to compete in the Natural Olympia in 2021. It was a crazy thought. That prep season, I nailed my macros. I didn't miss a workout. I envisioned myself on that stage. I watched past shows, and I kept thinking to myself, what if you can? My first show of the season was with a new federation. I got another pro card. My second show, I had to go to Vegas to qualify. Second place, I qualified. Third show, my first pro win. But then there it was, November of 2021, I found myself at the Golden Nugget in Las Vegas. I remember the morning of, walking through the casino, to the hall where they were hosting the event, and I pushed open the doors. The lights were dim because it was so early, and I was overcome with emotion. See, I had become a mom at age 20. Being a mom for me was, is, and always will be my most important job. But this journey was different. It was all mine. I couldn't make excuses. I had no one to blame. So to stand there in that moment and know that I had made it was surreal. I went on that day to compete. I got a second place in the Masters over 40 and a third place in Classic as a professional bodybuilder on one of the biggest stage for natural bodybuilding, standing alongside the best competitors in the entire world. Level unlocked. But then what? For 3 years, that cardinal had given me reassurance. And then in 2022, we were faced with a life-changing decision. See, I remember the days of being a single mom where I got paid twice a month. The first check went to rent, the second check went to daycare, and the groceries went on the credit card. Times were hard. But then I met my husband, and he told me to focus on how you can make things happen instead of why they won't. So in 2003, we were 2 broke kids who worked hard, learned to pivot and repeat. We bought our first 8 unit. And by 2022, we had built a portfolio of almost 800 rental units, 150 storage units that we owned and managed, and we had a team of over 20 employees. Looking back at that 20-year-old who was that single mom, I never would have imagined accomplishing so much. But then we were asked to sell our business. And it was then that I realized how much our business was a part of my identity. I had no idea what the right decision would be. Lots of sleepless nights. You know, the 2 to 3 a.m. where you wake up and you're awake forever. I still have those days. But I remember one night in particular I couldn't sleep, so I put on a meditation app. It guided me through a prairie where I sat at a bench, and I was told, Erika, you know you're going to do this at some point. The time is now. You need to be there for your parents. Whew. The thought of something happening to my parents was unfathomable. So I laid there and I cried deeply. But I also had comfort in knowing that everything was unfolding as it should. As the year continued, my family had some health problems. My uncle passed away, and I started to wonder, these signs, these messages, maybe they are real. And then in October of 2022, we downsized most of our business. And I was forced to reinvent myself. And that's when that idea of my fit tribe came back. I thought creating that space for people to thrive and grow and heal. So I adjusted to an empty nest, a downsized real estate company, and I made my focus about impact, aligning mind, body, and spirit. And then 2023 happened. It was the most profound year of my life. See, my dad had COPD that he'd suffered from for years, and he had caught a virus. And in the early morning of May 2nd, I went to his apartment to check on him. A strange light was on, a machine was running that shouldn't, and when I got to his room, I found him barely conscious. I called 911. The ambulance came. And I remember standing on his back deck looking and seeing the ambulance in the street, but it wasn't going yet. I'm like, that's weird. I waited, concerned, but then it moved on. When I got to the hospital, they told me that my dad had stopped breathing in the ambulance. They brought him back. We held off on intubating him. And while he became more aware as his oxygen levels came up, I said, Dad, you you stopped breathing in the ambulance. And he said to me, he said, Erika, I hate to break it to you. Sorry, folks, but there's nothing there. It's darkness. There's no bright lights, no angels. And I said to him, not only to comfort him, but to comfort myself. Well, clearly it wasn't your time. I'll think of a sign, and when it's your time, we'll know. So that night I went home and I thought, well, I can't do the cardinal. We've been using that for the last 3 years. So I thought about it, and it was the hummingbird. So that next day I went to the hospital and I said, Dad, I got it. It's a hummingbird. You got to send me a hummingbird. And he rolled his eyes and he smirked at me, as he often did. But with every text message I sent and with every visit I made to the hospital, I reminded him, don't forget to send me the hummingbird. Over the next 10 days, he ate an egg salad sandwich for every meal. He said his thank yous, his I love yous, and his goodbyes. On Thursday, May 11th, I had gone home after a long day at the hospital. Visiting hours were almost over when I got a call from the hospital to come back. My dad had become aware enough to request I come back to the hospital. And when I got there, I walked in and I was greeted by a chaplain who I had never seen before. It turns out she wasn't even supposed to work that day. And after she said some prayers for us, I told her about his fear of the darkness and the nothingness. And she looked at me with the warmest smile. And she said, Erika, I have seen the other side. It has the most beautiful colors. You don't have to worry. Now, this time, my dad's oxygen levels had gone down, and he wasn't responding, but I know he could hear that and that he had comfort from those words. And it was exactly what I needed to hear, the right time at the right place. As the night went on and his oxygen levels dropped, I reminded him, don't forget to send me the hummingbird. The chaplain paused. Did you say hummingbird? So I told her the story, the rest of the story, and she looked at me, and on her necklace was a beautiful hummingbird. Sometimes I can't believe that these signs really come to me. It is such a gift. But 3 weeks later, it was the day I was supposed to pick up my dad's ashes. I dropped off a wind chime at the hospital, and I stopped at our favorite place to go catch some lunch with my family. And I walked in the door, and there's that sandwich board with the special of the day. And what do you think it is but an egg salad sandwich? I go to order with a big smile on my face and a warmth in my heart. And the waitress has a giant hummingbird tattoo on her leg. It's been such a gift for me to be able to receive these messages. As 2023 went on, I was forced to reinvent myself. I was dealing with the grief of losing my father, the grief of losing my business. So while I focused on my Fit Tribe, we were able to still continue to grow our real estate business. And then in February of 2024, my husband and I, who were once two broke kids who learned how to work hard, pivot, and repeat, had the opportunity to buy our dream home. Now, I've gone through a lot of real estate transactions in my life, but this one was exceptionally stressful. I didn't sleep all night. But again, I had that vision of watching that sunset, that perfect sunset, after we had gotten there. So that night we get back to the house and it's cloudy. Well, where this house is, it's cloudy like 4 days out of the year. I'm like, come on. But I said, that's okay, it's not meant to be. So I'm busying myself in the house, and I'll again that voice to look outside. I step outside, and as the sun is setting, there's a bright red glow that starts in the sky. Starts small, and starts to expand into the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen in my whole life. I called my husband over. We embraced. We cried. Couldn't believe that we had gotten to where we were. And then, the perfect place, at the perfect time, a hummingbird circled us and hit him in the head. These affirmations continue to give me guidance and clarity and comfort. But this is not just about bodybuilding or business. It's about doing hard things, believing that you can do way more than you ever imagined, listening for those signs, letting them guide you along the way. Because maybe, just maybe, everything you've ever dreamed of is already within reach. Level unlocked. Thank you.
Your story matters, don't